Welcome back and good morning to our media panel, listener columnist Bill Ralston and Radio New Zealand producer Susan Baldacci. Welcome to you both. Good morning. Let's begin with an interesting scenario this week. The judge who gave the media a bit of a telling off. This was in relation to this man, Guy Hallwright, wasn't it, who was involved in a car accident not far from our main offices here on Mount Eden Road.
Yeah, well, I mean, the comments I found from Judge Raoul Neve were outrageous. He seemed to identify in some kind of class system way with Guy Hallwright. Now,
who's an investment banker,
Who's an investment banker. Whatever the case, he ran over a gentleman and did not stop to render aid or anything like that. You know, the judge was denying it was even a hit and run. In the most outrageous remarks he made, he called the media's coverage of the story prurient and vulgar. Now, that is ridiculous. That's the media's job, to shine the light on stories like this one.
I mean, if that's vile, I think New Zealand media, by and large, are real guppies and minnows when it comes to vile. You want vile, go see what the tabloids do. Yeah. That can be vile. So his definition, and to use the German word for being, gleeful at someone else's misfortune. I mean, really? Did you really go there? And did you really go there and not think someone like the Weekend Herald would not pick up on this and not turn the target to you?
Sure. Look, Judge Neve has picked a fight with the New Zealand Herald, at least if not all of New Zealand's media, because of his comments about their approach. They really shouldn't have done it at all. If this was accident had occurred with two teenage youths in the back streets of Manukau, would it even be before the court? It would be before the court, and at least one of those youths would be doing pokey time. Yes.
It was interesting because, of course, it was very close to TV3, so the cameras just walked up there and they filmed it all. Yep. It was like reality TV of a car accident, and this man had been run over and was, had a broken leg. It's perhaps as you mentioned though, the Weekend Herald's comments this weekend, they've taken them to task, haven't they?
And the judge has become the target now. And frankly, from what I've seen, and I wasn't in the courtroom, but from what I've seen, rightfully so, you have to wonder. I mean, some of the blogs, Kiwi Blog, Whale Oil, were also blogging about this over the weekend. And you do have to wonder, what was the judge thinking? Because he made it sound like he was giving the witness impact or the victim impact statement for the man who was convicted. So he now has become the target, and it will be interesting to see where the Herald takes this.
Well, it showed that the judge, I think, is completely out of touch with most New Zealanders.
No, indeed, he talked about the severe humiliation, didn't he, that this man had suffered?
And the thing is, I asked myself, would the press have covered this if it had been anybody else? Absolutely, because frankly, there by the grace of God go all of us who hasn't felt road rage, who hasn't felt that urge, especially
road rage. The judge said it wasn't road rage.
Oh yes, well of course, but who doesn't? You're in the shopping mall just before Christmas and you're fighting over the parking space. Anybody, and that's why this was a story that was legitimate for everybody to cover, and he has definitely changed the way the story will be covered from now.
Maybe some of the country's financial journalists were focusing a little too heavily on that this week because, Bill, you feel that they missed a big story with Telecom.
Well, I think they did. The payout for Paul Reynolds was somewhere in the vicinity of $12 million. It was in the financial results that were released on Friday, and I know the comms team at Telecom were sitting there with their fingers in the air waiting for the explosion. Nothing happened. No journalist picked up on it. Saturday, nothing. Sunday, nothing. By Monday, I gather, somebody in the PR business for Telecom actually bothered to ring the journalists and point it out to them so that they didn't think Telecom were trying to hide it from them. I just
so
think
they had flagged up the golden handshake, didn't they? The 1.75.
1.7, but then there were all the other short-term incentives, long-term incentives, bonuses, and other various adjustments, which actually pushed it out to nearly $12 million.
And that's the thing to me, is that it had been telegraphed. They had indicated that this was going to happen, and I'm not outraged that anybody was asleep at the wheel. I think it is yet another example of how that grunt work of going through the financial reports and things like that, not fun, not glamorous, not something that anybody really wants to do, but still a very important job. Lesson for all the people at journalism schools around the country. That's where you get stories. But it had been indicated that this was going to happen, and I think especially in the case of Reynolds, he led Telecom through a very difficult time. $12 million total package, that's a lot. But I would be a lot more upset if that was being offered to someone who had, basically cost a country millions or a company because of having to bail out.
Well, that's right. I mean, Paul Reynolds did, was at the helm anyway when they did the split and everything else. And if you were a telecom shareholder prior to the split, you'd be a very happy person now with your Chorus shares as well.
OK, let's touch now on Afghanistan, because this has been on our agenda, and 5 soldiers losing their life as well in Australia this week. Just horrendous. How have you found the coverage from the media?
Well, you know what really bothers me is that we think we can go to a news conference in Wellington and ask, would the result have been any different if they had been in different vehicles, and think that we've got the answer. The truth is we don't have the answer, and the only way to know that is to be on the ground. And I completely understand why we don't have New Zealand journalists constantly on the ground embedded with our soldiers. It's not very practical, but it's not just something that's happening in New Zealand. It's happening around the world. I think we will see a real influx when we get closer to the pullout dates, but the bottom line is it's all off of all of our agendas, because we haven't got people there telling us what's really happening. As you know, what you hear and what you see are 2 different things.
It's very, very difficult, though, purely for expense, which is ridiculous, but that's the reality.
Well, you've been in a couple of times, and you know how expensive it is. But when I was at TVNZ, we did send teams in from time to time to do stories and to come back again. They should have been probably on a higher, and should still be on a higher rotate than they're doing at the moment. If you put a journalist and a camera in there, it'd be $500,000 a year, easy, I would have thought, in satellite costs and everything else. We do have, there is one New Zealander on the ground there, and that's John Stevenson.
Yes, yeah.
I would have thought in print terms it would be far cheaper to maintain a couple of journalists on the ground over there for longer periods. They did in Vietnam.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. We thought with new technology, satellite phones, backpack journalism, all of these things would make this easier. But in fact, I think we have less coverage rather than more.
But I think that's because it's risk-based here. Afghanistan's a very different theatre. You can't get in a car and hire a fixer and drive around Afghanistan. You can't. So you have to be half the time embedded with troops or travelling with NATO. And there you get into the ethical issue of just who's positioning you to report on what.
Embedding is probably the safest option of all. You can't get in the car and drive down the road to see what's going on, because you'll be blown up or killed.
Well, shock horror, it's hard.
Yes.
Covering wars have always been hard. I just hope that we don't ignore it. I think it's too important. And not just us, but the global media. Mark Shields, the New York Times, was very critical because the Republican convention not once mentioned Afghanistan. That's because it's not on the agenda anywhere.
And tragically, that's the case here, really, unless someone dies.
Yes.
That's the reality.
That's right.
OK, let's look at, finally, the scenario with Charlotte Dawson in Australia. Gosh, I don't know. She's in reality TV over there. She is a New Zealander. She's not very happy with New Zealand, but she's been anti-troll. She's been going out talking anti-trolls on Twitter. People have targeted her. She's ended up in hospital.
She went to hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning after attending a glamorous do, as she does. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. I still have to say, and I wish her all the best. I hope that her health is okay. But how hard is it just not to read that? The worst thing that you can do is not be talked about when you're in a position like she is. If it weren't for her popularity, she probably wouldn't be a judge with Australia's Next Top Model. And there's really nothing that anybody can do to stop people being nasty. We just can't stop people from saying bad things about each other. So, where do you take it? How do you stop it?
This is the dark side of Twitter, isn't it?
She appeared in a television program on cyberbullying, identified one of her own cyberbulliers. That person got suspended from their job. At that point, it was reported that the group Anonymous then coordinated a worldwide troll attack on her. Yeah. It shows you how fast the interwebby thing can move in the digital age. And when you've got groups like the Law Commission saying, oh, yes, we can regulate the interwebby thing and make people take stuff down, it's just too slow, too cumbersome and too elephantine to actually be able to control it. The best, you can block people on Twitter,
yes.
But by and large, I think your advice is best. Just don't read it.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because for the first time ever, you can have one-on-one contact with someone who is high profile or you admire. Dan Carter this week has just gone on Twitter. a massive number of followers because suddenly you can speak directly to Dan.
Yep.
And the allure, of course, in a celebrity, the downside of that is what we see with Charlotte Dawson.
Well, you know, there's good and evil. That's the thing about most things. You know, Facebook, all the social media. You can be used for really great things. It can be used very negatively. So you just have to monitor what you read and what you believe and what you choose not to believe.
Yeah.
All right, we do have to leave it there. Bill Ralston, Susan Baldacci, thank you for your time this morning.